It's Movie Time is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.com.
The award-winning It's Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mark Pfeiffer.
And this is It's Movie Time. Mark, what a time of year. Up until May, nothing. The Oscars are done, and people are dumping their movies onto our screens between now and then. Is there anything out there worth seeing?
There hasn't been a whole lot, but I think perhaps the movie we're going to talk about today might be worth people's time.
All right. And we're looking at Non-Stop with Liam Neeson. What do you think?
Well, we've had a period here where it seems like Liam Neeson has become sort of this aging action star. He didn't really start out doing that sort of thing. And we've got with Non-Stop and then recently the Taken films and The Grey and Unknown, a series in which he's kind of gone around punishing the bad guys of Europe in most cases.
Yes.
And audiences have responded. So it's been nice to see him find this other sort of flavor in what he can do and go about just kind of stirring things up in a way that we don't need superheroes.
You know, we had some pretty bad disasters in the air. In reality, 9/11, of course, and this is post 9/11 terrorism business. We had Denzel Washington, right?
It was called Flight, where he was an alcoholic pilot and then saved a plane from crashing. But of course, there was the entire investigation after that. And that film was more about alcoholism than it was
That's true.
Terrorism or anything to do with the airline industry.
Now, in this one, very simply, some electronic criminal is terrorizing the plane as it's in flight. Our marshal, played by Liam Neeson, is the object of the scorn of this electronic business, and one passenger every 20 minutes is going to die until the bank or until the airline transfers $150 million into an account which, strangely, Mark, is in Neeson's character's name.
Right, he appears to be set up, although things are vague enough at the beginning to really know who's on the up and up and who's really on the take. And I think that's one of the nice things about this is we don't really have any grounded sense of which characters are the ones that we should believe and which are the ones that we shouldn't.
They even have an Arab-looking guy who immediately we feel he might be it, and he turns out, and I think I can disclose this, he turns out to be a doctor who's helpful. That doesn't mean he isn't the terrorist, but it's just another one of those tropes now of these suspenseful thrillers, and particularly in the air, where we immediately think it's going to be somebody from the East, and we have characters, as you say, all over the place who represent every different kind.
Right, I think there's supposed to be 130 people on board, and basically all of them, even potentially the pilot,
yes,
could be responsible for all the shenanigans going on. And you know, you've got this enclosed environment, and you've got the clock running, and of course you've got people who are dying by Neeson's hands or someone else's every 20 minutes. That keeps this thing propelled forward to where we feel as though enough is happening, even though it's not like they've got a lot of room to navigate in. I mean, anybody who's ridden in coach certainly knows that. It
certainly reduces the amount of money they have to spend on sets by just having one and having the plane. And the director does a pretty good job of maneuvering inside that plane. So you have the feel of claustrophobia, but still the sense that something can happen. As they particularly do, I think, Mark, in the bathrooms for some reason.
Yeah, he finds a lot of luxurious space in there to kick back and smoke a cigarette and have a drink if he wants. Yeah, I do think that they've done a nice job of being able to take what's certainly a confined area and be able to move around. Now, granted, this is a flight over the Atlantic, so the plane's a little bit bigger than you would get hopping, city to city, perhaps in the States. But still, he doesn't have a lot of options, and I think that one of the things this film tries to go about doing is certainly addressing a lot of the aggravations people have with flying these days, but also just how you deal with the situation in which you don't have a lot of control. And Neeson certainly doesn't have that, and he's not getting the support on the ground.
No, no. And he's getting some support in this guy from Julianne Moore, who plays the lady sitting next to him on the plane, and she's able to give him some help, but still remain a suspect. And she's pretty glamorous, plus some other TV people.
You've got Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey, who's
Right.
one of the flight attendants. Lupita Nyong'o, who doesn't have much of a speaking part in this film. I think she has a few lines, but
Yeah, definitely before her Oscar nomination.
and you even with the passengers, you have some recognizable faces,
Yes.
which I think, of course, stacks the deck a little bit as to who you suspect might be ultimately responsible, because
Right.
it's not going to be probably somebody who's completely unfamiliar. But at the same time, what they've been able to do is populate the film with enough people that you might recognize even if you can't place a name with them, to give the feel of a bigger cast than what ultimately is just a Liam Neeson picture.
That's a great point. About Neeson, Mark. He's in his early 60s. You would have thought after the death of his wife, which has profoundly affected him, and some would say has given him a little more gravitas than he might have had. That's just the way we'd like to think it is, that he's brooding and contemplative and angry and surly. But Mark, he's making a career.
Well, you kind of see that perhaps it's in response to all of the superhero movies that are aimed more toward a teenage audience. That Neeson, Kevin Costner was just in 3 Days
Right.
to Kill. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone were in several films last year, and Schwarzenegger has another one in a few weeks from now. I think you're seeing some of the star power rather than it being a film based on the pre-existing property or the character.
Great.
And with Neeson, you've got that presence. You know, you've got that something that you can't really
Boy.
define, that you put him on there and you kind of let him growl his lines out as he's punching out passengers. And to me, it's more interesting than just the latest and greatest special effects, because we get so much of that anymore that it kind of has become something I feel like I'm immune to. Whereas if it's coming from the actor, that's not anything that really is replicated. It's specific to that person.
I think that's a great point. This film rests on the shoulders of Liam Neeson. He's a big guy. He has a crooked nose. He has a distracted look in him, but he has a strength of character that he brings as a human being to the role. And I would suggest, Mark, and I think you have suggested this yourself, that he is the reason that this movie is believable.
Sure.
If you took any of the things that happen in here, and particularly as you get toward the end,
It gets more implausible, certainly, as it goes along. But the fun is in watching him try to figure it out. I mean, this is, to some extent, basically an Agatha Christie whodunit in midair.
oh, that's good.
And so you've got to have him be someone that you're really hooked into. And what I like is that they suggest things in his background that can cast some doubt on him, but at the same time gives his character a little more depth, and doesn't have to be something that they spell out, you know, in a half hour to set up this whole thing. It's basically, we see him knocking a few back in the car before he gets on the flight.
Yes.
He's talking with his supervisor, and he wants to get, you know, rescheduled onto something else. So we know that he's troubled, and of course he's being put into a very stressful situation, as it turns out.
Yeah.
But we don't have to have, you know, the previous 20 years of his life, which it seems like with a lot of movies these days. They get so invested in putting all this backstory in, and it's not necessary, as we see in a case like this.
Mark, you just hit just the right spot with me on that comment. I am so annoyed by all of the either loves or families, wives, children that you have to cut to for the backstory. It's just so irrelevant to. We all know that if you're married to somebody, that person is not going to like your being an air marshal. There's nobody that's going to like that. And why should we have to go through it to find that out? So you're absolutely right. There is no wasted time in this movie with backstory.
It's basically a pure genre picture that knows the beats that it needs to hit
Yes.
to keep the audience going with it. And sure, it becomes more ridiculous as it goes on, but I think that's kind of what you're also wanting to get out of
Oh,
something
you
like
bet,
this.
yeah. All right, Mark, you're the president of the Central Ohio Film Critics Association, so the grade you give to this film is going to have more weight than anybody else's.
Oh, is that right?
Mark, what grade are you going to give it?
I would give it a B. I think, like with Taken and The Gray, that this is one of the better films that Neeson's done as far as his sort of reconfiguration into an aging action star. It's not a great movie, but it's something that I think that, especially if you enjoy a lot of the procedurals on television, which is practically all that CBS shows these days, that's essentially what you get here. I mean, it'd be very easy to see this carried over into another setting and have Neeson, I don't know, on a train or a boat. Or I mean, if the movie's done very well, it certainly could be continued if they'd like to do that.
And Mark, I have to agree with you completely. I have awarded it a B as well. It is, in many respects, a B movie. But at this time of year, my friends, that's pretty good for us. I'll tell you one thing, though, Mark. For Nonstop, if you see it, you may delay that next trip to London by air.
I don't think we'll be seeing this on the in-flight entertainment anytime soon.